Welcome. This is the March 21st Seneca County IDA meeting. We have a quorum today. Let's start with the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have a motion to approve last week's minute, last month's meeting minutes?
Yeah, I'll move. Oh, I'll second it.
Thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. Item number 2 is the review and approval of the annual audit. And who would like to take that?
I can review it, and then if there's anything I missed, Bob, if you want to jump in. So as you all know, we, in the beginning of our year, go through our audit process, and that includes what is referred to as a single audit, which is related to our revolving loan fund, because it was constituted with federal money, and we have above a certain dollar threshold in that account. So we'll start with going through the financial executive summary for the IDA. Of note is this year, what do they refer to it as now? An unmodified opinion. So the auditors have issued an unmodified opinion for the audit, meaning there were no major deficiencies or anything encountered during this process.
It used to be referred to as a clean opinion, so
Yeah.
at this point.
So
Language has changed.
we've got, we'll start with our statement of net position on the assets. So you'll see here comparison between 2023 and 2022. As of the end of 2023, our total net position was just above 3.9 million compared to 3.79 million in 2022. So we actually are in a better net position than we were previously. That is most notable on the current asset side, so meaning, cash and cash equivalents. So overall, very positive. Nothing else really of note there as far as changes in net position. A lot of that is due to operating revenues. So we did receive more agency fees within the year than we did last year, mostly due to the timing of some payments. But as we move in a little bit further to some of these summaries, you'll also see the grant revenue from the state reflected as a receivable. We didn't actually get paid on that until 2024. And then the ARPA payment from the county, which was an additional $20,000. So operating revenues were up in 2023 by about $133,000. Expenses were down. That is in large part because in 2022 we transferred the fire training facility at the depot to the county, and so that had to be reflected as a loss on the books, which is why that number under operating expenses was so high that year at 1.1 million. Moving on to the next page, so we've got operating fund summarized statement of net position. Again, overall we were in a pretty good position as far as cash. The accounts receivable was higher than normal for 2023, but again, that is largely due to the state grant payment. That was about $93,000 and change out of that $283,000 in total. Let's see here, are there any other significant changes? I mean, not really on that sheet, so we'll move on to the very last couple of pages. Our rent and lease income, you'll see, was consistent between both years. That's the Del Lago payment, which will be running out very shortly. And then obviously our agency fees were up in 2023 by about $139,000. So it was very positive to see the additional project flow coming through. Personnel was a little bit more compared to the previous year, in large part because we brought Dave on board, and I believe 2023 was his first full calendar year with us. We hired him about mid-2022, which contributed to that change. The contractual expenses, that is where the variance there was, I think, in large part due to the fire training facility. I think that's where they're reflecting out on this particular schedule. And then, federal, state, and county support, you'll see that increased by 20,000. That's where they're reflecting the ARPA funds that came in, just to kind of show you all where the money is being shown here. And then the very last schedule shows the revolving loan fund. And so this is essentially the summary of what was reflected in the single audit on the revolving loan fund. We were up on cash, and that largely because Bonadent did a full payoff in 2023, and then, our other loans have been making their payments regularly, and there were no new loans issued in that year. So cash was up to $941,000 compared to $851,000 in the previous year, which is also why loans receivable was down as folks are making their payments. But no issues were identified either on the single audit. No significant changes were made. There were no deficiencies. So the audit committee has reviewed all of this already and has recommended approval by this board for staff to post the audit, the single audit, the management letter to the Paris system in time for the deadline at the end of this month. Anything to add, Bob?
No, I think you've covered it well. Again, the most important thing is receiving a clean opinion, is the term I use, and with no significant management letter issues that were identified as well. And the previous year have been resolved as well.
Questions, anyone? Okay, I would like a motion to approve the auditor's report.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
this is a roll call vote, I believe, Kelly?
Yes. Mr. Brusso?
Yes.
Mr. Brownell?
Yes.
Mr. Kircher?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Tom Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Shipley?
Yes.
Mr. Lott?
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie and Mr. Keim absent, motion carried.
Okay. Next item, the ABO measurement report.
So this is something that we have to do every year. So for Seth, this is kind of a new thing, but we have to have the board essentially review this. It's a report on what the agency's mission statement was for the year, what measurements we use in terms of, success, which you'll see on here is really typically in line with what's reported to the Paris system, so meaning largely on the capital invested and jobs created. It doesn't go into the same level of detail that we do when we do our internal sort of reports to you guys on a quarterly basis.
Yep.
It also outlines basically a self-evaluation, and that you'll see the number of projects that the IDA is actively supporting. So this is the number of projects that we have to do annual Paris reports for. And that's for the duration of the term of their pilot. So there are 28 active projects, just so you guys all know, for a total of $591 million of private investment, 2,092 full-time jobs retained, 168 full-time construction jobs, and 903 jobs created. And then the last bit of it is just a governance certification that everybody's read and understood the mission, that the board appoints the management here, so staff, that there are policies for all of that kind of thing. So what we'll need is a vote sort of acknowledging and approving this report. But does anybody have questions first?
No questions?
No questions.
Do we have a motion to accept this report?
I'll move.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor of accepting the ABO measurement report? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have accepted the report. Okay, some standing updates. Jeff, you're next.
Okay, so first and foremost, the solar eclipse probably is, everyone is aware of the solar eclipse happening April 8th. The Chamber has distributed, on behalf of Seneca County Tourism, nearly 10,000 safety glasses among our community, businesses, residents, and the municipalities. We also have produced commemorative posters to mark the event for Seneca County, and those have been very popular with the local community as well. So that has been really exciting. Hopefully, no clouds that day. That's what we're all hoping now. The other on that related note, though, most of the hotels in this community are booked up for Sunday night, April 7th, and many of them have bookings for either Saturday night and Sunday night, or Sunday night and Monday night. So I would estimate probably about between 80 to 90% occupancy for our lodging properties, our hotels, and our hotels and B&Bs for that period. And then I was just in communication with Finger Lakes Premier Properties today, and there are nearly 130 vacation rentals that we have helped Finger Lakes Premier Properties supply product to as well. So really exciting about the solar eclipse coming up in just a couple of weeks from now. The Chamber Board of Directors met yesterday for our annual strategic planning session along with our board meeting. And one of the things that came out of that I thought would be interesting to all of you here on the IDA is the Chamber Board would like to find an opportunity to use the Chamber resources and network to help with the housing situation here in Seneca County. So wherever we can, and I know this is something that the IDA is starting to move or at least identify and look into as well. So I think there could be a lot of synergy between the Chamber and the IDA and the county for that event. And finally, my last report would be our Chamber Board, again, signed off on 4 initiatives that the statewide business coalition is advocating for at the state, pro-business legislative policies that the statewide business coalition is advocating in New York State during budget season now. And so we signed off as a Seneca County Chamber for this community. And so I will happily, or maybe not happily, report on the progress of that, the status of that after the budget is passed. That's my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions, comments for Jeff? Next, Ernie, anything from the Board of Supervisors? you'd like to
Just
say?
that we're working on infrastructure all the time, and the Willard project and some other little projects are starting to pick up, so hope we get some development going. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ernie. All right, on the agenda here is another item called Chairman's Remarks. This is not a standing item, but it is an item I want to sort of introduce today. In your packet is a document that looks like this. It says employment data. This is a type of data that is collected by the State of New York's Department of Labor, and then they report it every quarter. So what it shows, what they're collecting is the number of employees by occupation and by industry. And I'm familiar with this data because in a prior professional life, I worked gathering these types of numbers to measure just how many job openings there were in a community at any given time, and who was doing that advertising for positions and what kinds of positions at a very granular level were they advertising for. So I'm going to take you through what you're looking at. So what you're seeing on the first page is a chart that shows the total employment in Seneca County from 2000 through the middle of 2023. So it's about 9 months old is the lag here. And you can, in 2020, there were 10,137 employees in Seneca County. In 2023, in July, there were 10,320. So a gain of about 160 73, something like that. Otherwise known as flat. And you can see in here some bumps and some declines. There's a bump in 2005, and that would correspond to the opening of the Five Points facility. You'll see a big bump in 2017 when we went from 11,475 to 12,508. That's Del Lago. So when we talk about how the impact of the IDA on employment in the county, that's certainly a pretty clear net positive. In 2020, you see a fairly significant decline from 12,439 down to 10,705. That's COVID. That's COVID hitting certainly Del Lago pretty severely, but also the entire accommodation and food service industry. From 2020, totally, we have seen continued declines from 10,705 to the middle of last year, 10,320. Any questions? So,
I have one.
yeah, sure.
So COVID knocked out basically 2,000 jobs. But to me, when we try to go out for dinner every weekend, the whole family someplace, the restaurants all seem to be operating again. There's no restaurants sitting empty, I don't believe. Why haven't jobs gone back up?
65,000, no, there, 64,000.
I mean,
So-
are the restaurants, maybe Jeff knows, are the
Well,
restaurants
so-
operating with less people?
Well, so Ralph, here's where the data gets interesting. The category accommodation and food service is a very broad category,
Mhm.
but there are smaller and smaller and smaller subsets of that category for just restaurants specifically.
Yep.
So to answer your question, we would have to go a little bit deeper in the data to see, okay, how is the restaurant category doing as opposed to the hotel business? Some of the hotel business has not come back, Del Lago has not come back. And because of, for a lot of reasons, they're at like, what, 70% of what they were at their peak. You could look at these numbers and say at the outset, Del Lago filled every job they could fill. They just made sure that they were ready for a massive success, and so their employment was at its all-time high. When COVID hit, obviously they had to shrink, and then coming back from COVID, and they've described this, their business is a little different. They don't have quite the same business. The buffet's not there. There's a lot of things that they're not doing today that they were doing, but then what they're also saying is they're having trouble. They've got 90 open positions, and they can't fill them. And a lot of that is not just, that's not just restaurant servers, but that's some of them more highly compensated and professional positions. So they're trying, they say, but they just can't seem to fill them.
So my deal with this is that the government keeps coming out with reports that jobs across the nation are steadily going up, like 300,000, I think, in April. But then our same government will come back this month and next month and reduce that number by 150 to 180,000 jobs. So were the jobs never really created? Are they using some kind of logistics that aren't accurate and they correct them later? Because
I mean, they put
there's
out,
a lot of
I mean,
things.
that's the Bureau of Labor Statistics puts out that number, and then they go back and refine it. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. But over the long term, the trend line is up.
Up from when we had COVID.
Up from when we had COVID. But,
Yeah,
I
let's
mean, we can look-
remember that.
Yeah.
So there are always some adjustments that take place from that initial number.
But every place you go, there's help wanted signs.
But not in this county.
Well, I'm across the nation, because Shirley and I drove to Houston for a meeting down there. And all the way, you saw help wanted signs. We're in Houston. The hotel couldn't do a lot of things because they're looking for help.
You're looking
Even
for-
down there, they can't get the migrants across to work. So, it just, seems like there's a lot of discrepancies out there, and it makes you wonder who you can believe and who you can't believe.
Well, believe me, I only raised these numbers because I've worked at them for 20 years, and I know they're not perfect, but I know there's no better alternative to it. And they really are really seriously compiled and revised as they can identify them. These are really good numbers. And what I'm suggesting here is that if we're going to look at some kind of metric to evaluate the economic performance of the county, certainly this is one of the important ones. Things like sales tax receipts, housing starts, there are some more than just this. But this, from my perspective, is collected by an independent agency. It's got data going all the way back to 1810, not for the county, but back to 2000 for the county, at a really detailed level. So what this report will show, for instance, and I'll walk you through it, don't want to bore everyone here, but I want everybody to take a look at this and know this is available, and know there's another layer actually beneath it of more detail. And then we're gonna look at some other counties, because Seneca County is not the only county that looks like this, Ralph, it is not.
Ontario doesn't.
Ontario
From
does
us-
not.
'cause I went through this
That's
already,
all right.
so
All right.
Ontario County's pretty well stayed flat.
Well, so
And-
these are all relevant observations, definitely relevant observations. So in Seneca County, roughly, I asked an analyst to take this data and look at the ratio of public sector to private sector employees. And Seneca County has a slightly higher ratio, percentage of public sector employees, which makes it subject to sort of precipitous changes, like when you see in the bottom here, the tail here continuing to fall post-COVID. Well, a best estimate here, that's Willard. That's the closure of the Willard site. And that's what happens when you're not necessarily in a, again, point of view. One way to look at it is when you're not in a private sector economic environment, then you can see precipitous changes, both upwards, as with 5 Points you see here, but also downwards, as you see with either the depot or Willard now. Going further, on the second page, to look at these, I asked the analyst to look at individual sectors. And these, we look at these sectors by number. So across the top, you see NAICS, that's the North American Industry Classification System. These are industries, the manufacturing industry, the wholesale trade industry, retail, healthcare and social assistance, accommodation, and food service. You can then begin to track each of these industries over time. If you'll look, you'll see the colors are a little bit tricky, but accommodation and food service, you see that jump coming in 2017 where Del Lago opened up.
Although, Bruce, in Seneca County, not having the details behind all these, is it really impact of major employers, not, the day-to-day, this restaurant, 5 people here, 10 people here, but mainly, the big ones, the Lago, big up, big down, the 5 Points, big up, Willard, big down, not necessarily little guys here and there, but just a few
Well,
bigger
it's a fair question.
players.
I think fair question. The second, again, we'll get there. I'll try to give you a partial answer to that. We looked at the number of sectors that were growing by the most. And we looked from 2000 to 2023. Accommodation and food service is by far the biggest grower, the biggest increase, that is, in the Del Lago category. Retail trade up a little bit. Public administration, the public sector, up a little bit. Wholesale trade up a little bit. The other categories, agriculture, forestry and fishing, and management, these are really tiny categories, so they don't really represent much. But the data, I think, kind of passes a sniff test. You can look at the data and you can compare it to what your lived experience is and see a correlation between the two. Now, to your question, Ralph, on where have we seen the declines? Where have the declines been? Manufacturing, that's down a little. Finance, down a little. Construction, not a lot of construction, that's gonna be down a little bit. Healthcare and social assistance, down big. But that's when the hospital closed. Education is a different one. Why has education shrunk 31%? And that's, Steve, to your point, is this like, are you losing in dribs and drabs, or are you losing in big chunks? I think in education, we've been losing in dribs and drabs as the populations age, and Sarah helped clarify this for me.
With the decline of enrollment at school districts,
Correct, correct,
it's also affected the employment base as well.
correct.
Did you also have Eisenhower closed down here?
That might
Some
have,
up and down.
yeah, but it's come back, probably net down as a result,
Yeah.
overall. So that's Seneca County by the numbers, all right? So then following, we looked at some other counties. Let's look at Schuyler County. Schuyler County's up from 4,200 to 5,000. You know, they're back up. Not big numbers, you know, they're not huge base of numbers, but they're up. Let's take a look at the next county. Yates County. It's kind of similar. Sarah suggested we look at their numbers because they have a kind of mixed economy. There's a tourism economy there, there's an agricultural economy there. They seem to have recovered nearly from where they were before, and they're still up overall from 2000. Next county, let's take a look at the next one. Wyoming. Wyoming County is not as pretty a picture. You know, what's going on there and why, you have to dig into the numbers. It's not really our problem, it's their problem over there. Finally, I think the last one's Ontario. Yeah, Ontario is up from 2000, and they're up sort of not quite to where they were pre-COVID, but they've also begun to recover. I'm not saying, you know, I don't say one county's performing better or any, you really have to ask why. If you look at Monroe County, from 2000 to the present, Monroe County's down because of what happened to Monroe County, but it's coming back slowly. Now, you might say, okay, how do you use this? So, if you page forward a little bit to an eye chart, what we did was say, within each of these industry sectors, this page with the eye chart. So we got a list of Sarah got a list of all the businesses in Seneca County and was able to assign the industry code to them. And how did you do that?
So the list of businesses comes from New York State Department of Labor. They have a database on their website that I was able to somewhat tediously pull from. It's not, I will say, 100% accurate. This list, we've only printed 2 pages for you. There are many, many more than this. There are about 1,000 entries all told of employers in Seneca County.
Lot Farms is here.
But it did include, this data I noticed did include Willard, so there are some things, you know, the Department of Labor data hasn't caught up necessarily to some of the real-time things. As far as the industry classification code, so the Department of Labor data did not provide those. It provided the industry name, which corresponds directly to a NAICS code, and it provided a business description. And so I used ChatGPT to extrapolate the actual NAICS code numbers based on those 2 inputs.
So what this gives us, to your question, Ralph, is that we can look at every single category of business, identify in the county who's included in that category, and then evaluate whether they're being accurately recorded, A, but more importantly, B, are these businesses in sectors that conceivably could be growing or should be growing? And what's it going to take to get them to grow so that we can actually see that overall total employment line begin to turn up and to the right? That's the ultimate goal. Now, with that in mind, everybody with me so far? Make sense? So Lot Farms, they have you as having between 1 and 4 employees, Ralph.
That's my brother, that's not me.
Oh, that's not you?
No,
Okay.
that's okay. They have,
Do
I know
they-
they have 1 employee.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yep.
So as you look down this list, you kind of can test the quality of the data based on what you know. And you could also see where some of them are mischaracterized. You know, some wineries are characterized as wineries, some wineries are characterized as farms. But, you know, one way or another, if we want, we can begin to clean that up. I think the bank's in here, and the bank's Tom. I'm pretty sure.
If anybody's interested in the full list, I have it in Excel format and can, share that with you guys.
So, one more
So-
exhibit here.
One question at first.
Sure.
So, like a lot of these farms are rated 1 to 4.
Right,
And
employees.
I know most of them are probably in the 1 or 2, very few there's the 2 largest farms in the county, Ostick and Maybury. I've probably got the numbers that are on here, 20 to 49 or something like that, I think it is. So when you take all of your pages, Sarah, and add them up, does it come to the 10,400 or whatever was on our other?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. We
Yeah.
haven't done that yet.
There's gotta be a range, I would think, because you're gonna take the lowest number.
And then the
for each
highest
one,
number,
And the
yeah.
highest.
Yeah.
I'd kinda like to know what that is.
Fair
to
enough.
see where the 10,000 comes on this range, because
Okay.
I think most of these people are gonna be on the low side of these range numbers.
Certainly in the ag.
From what
Yeah.
at least the ones I know.
Yep,
So-
and I think you're quite possibly right, because 1 to 4 was the lowest range, and there's a lot of those, especially when you get into the healthcare service sector. There's a lot of individual, like a single doctor or
Yeah.
a single nurse or that kind of thing.
So how you use this is in the next exhibit. Yeah, I'm suggesting that one of the ways you can use this information, not just to track how it's performing, but it's back in February, Sarah attended a economic development conference that included a presentation by a researcher with a big real estate firm, Newmark. Newmark is one of the biggest real estate firms around. And what they did was try to identify the industry sectors, those NAICS codes that we are working with in any of these contexts, and looking at what industries are likely to benefit as the chip fabrication, or as they call it, nanotechnology industry begins to take off theoretically in this part of the state. And they were looking at between Buffalo and Albany. And so what they did was they reached out to all the interested parties and said, which businesses in your area are likely to be a supplier to a chip fabrication business? This is the ecosystem for chip fabrication. And they listed, in this case, the top 25. So the number 1, semiconductor and related device manufacturing, 334413, code 3344. Well, that's Micron right there. Then industrial gas manufacturing, they need a lot of gas, so, to make this stuff. So another category of industry that potentially could be a growth sector by virtue of participating in that part of the economy. And it goes all the way down the line. And there's 81 of these 6-digit NAICS codes. And one way to look at the county is to say, of all the businesses in our county, how many of them fall or are categorized in a 6-digit NAICS code that's here as a potential supplier in the nanotechnology universe. And if we can find some, then maybe they make clean room booties, you know, whatever they make. Can we begin to try to focus our efforts on those specific businesses? That's again an option for us. I think it's a way for us to get our arms around, you know, how to focus our energy and where we potentially can see some growth. Any questions?
I've got one. Semiconductor industry, are there other industries that are at the top of the heap that you would want to consider doing this for, or do we
Sure.
focus there?
So one sort of school of thought in economic development is this cluster theory. You have these clusters of industry, and within each cluster you have a list of industries that are likely to be participating in that economic growth. And yes, I mean, tourism is a cluster.
Yep.
One of the, back in 2019, when the IDA had Peter Fairweather do a strategic plan, he identified 3 clusters. One was agri-technology, agri-tech, and there's a laundry list of businesses that can support agri-tech, and we've got principally Cornell as the engine behind that. Another one was advanced manufacturing. This is what they concluded based on their work we would see as a area of growth. Advanced manufacturing fits pretty squarely into this area right here with nanotechnology. And then finally, the third priority was tourism. That's again, a lot of accommodation, food service, and other types of tourism activity. I think we've got a much better handle on the tourism side of things than we do on either the agri-tech or the advanced manufacturing. Those are just opportunities right now.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, questions? So I'm probably going to ask a couple, we may reach out to a couple of you to work with us on the staff to try to flesh this out and to begin to try to build a plan around, okay, where do we want to see the growth? What do we have to do to achieve that growth? And what's it going to cost us, and how do we keep track of it? I mean,
Sarah, you mentioned ChatGPT and using that to help with your analysis. I think that's a great idea, and I would love to lend a hand in terms of extending that analysis on this data.
Doesn't your employer have a stake in that company?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd also like to just make use of the capability to see what ChatGPT can actually provide us and going deeper on the analysis.
Yeah. No, this was really, what Sarah was able to do with ChatGPT just in assigning these, it's really hard to assign these codes, and bingo, there
Yeah.
it was. It was really well done.
Yeah.
I was very thankful for that tool, because when Bruce first approached me with this idea of how do we get a list of all the businesses in Seneca County with their NAICS code, like,
Good luck.
that's gonna take me weeks, if not months. I was able to do it in 3 days.
Yep.
It
Not a
would-
surprise.
It would have taken weeks, if not months.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
great.
so more to come on that, and I'm going to take you up on your offer second.
Sure. Yeah.
Any other business?
Just, I guess I'll bring to everybody's attention, so we were successfully awarded what will be a pass-through grant from the New York State DOT for the Passenger and Freight Rail Assistance Program in the amount of $1.512 million. That is for rail upgrades at the depot. The pass-through will be going to, I believe it's actually to Deer Haven Park, but essentially to
Is that in
assist
the depot
Mr. Martin.
itself?
Yes. So it's on property that's owned by Earl Martin. It's to be passed through, and his company will be doing the repairs and the upgrades. And he is working on an interconnection agreement with Finger Lakes Rail. who also was awarded some funding for some of their various projects, so. Very positive. We don't have details yet as far as, a grant agreement or any of that kind of
What kind of things would Martin be
thing.
doing with that?
So it's only to rehab existing rail, because as you may remember, last October, I believe it was, we passed a resolution to pursue the application, but also identified this project as a type 2 action under seeker, which is the State Environmental Quality Review. Essentially, there is no new construction associated with this so that it wouldn't have any kind of adverse impact. It's upgrading the existing rail ties, and that kind of thing to make the rail and the depot usable again, because it's really not right now.
I think some of their long-term plans are there, Tom, is to develop some sort of siding business, because Keystone has told me that they're figuring on railing things in. I think Earl's gonna kinda do like what's here on 414.
Yeah, he wants to do a little transloading facility.
Yeah,
Yes.
some of their issues with the rails are just the gauge of the rail themselves,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
it's really
and I've
hasn't
seen
replaced
pictures, I mean,
that.
there's a lot, the wood and the ties is rotted and, things are overgrown, and so,
I just wonder if you fix up the rail beds and the ties, is the gauge of the rails gonna connect with or interact well with other things you're trying to do that are a different gauge today?
Then there's
That was
another
one of the
problem
issues
when
they
you get
had, but-
north of depot up here by 5 and 20 and 96A, they can't push too much weight around that bend
Yeah.
because it'll roll the cars.
Yeah.
There's other upgrades that have to be done.
That's why
And
there's
the
lots to
water-
do, and I just wonder what
so
the key ones
he's,
and-
this project is specifically for the depot for the property owned by Earl. But Finger Lakes Rail, they have been working very closely together, and obviously they'll have to in order to successfully provide service. But Finger Lakes Rail has been looking at what needs to be done in other parts of their system
They
as
have
far
a
as
good-
upgrades
yeah,
and
They have a good
improvements.
feel for what kind of things are the critical
Yeah.
ones to do in there.
So that was very good news.
It is good news. I mean, Earl came to us to,
Yes, so they were not eligible to apply for the grant themselves, which is why they came to us to essentially be a pass to remedy, so,
it's big.
yeah.
Any other business? I then would request a motion to enter into executive session under Public Officers Law, Article 7, Section 105, to discuss the financial credit or employment history of a particular corporation or matters leading to the approval of a contract for a particular corporation. Could someone make a motion?
So moved.
You know, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are entering. Okay, we have returned from executive session, and we are now open to a motion to approve a contract for architectural services related to the, what we are referring to as the Excellus building, the former Excellus building.
I'll move.
Tom,
I'll second.
Steve, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
We should do a roll, cause it's a resolution.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Bruzo,
Yes.
Mr. Brownell,
Yes.
Mr. Keim,
Yes.
Mr. Kircher,
Yes.
Mr. Bruce Murray,
Yes.
Mr. Tom Murray.
Yes.
Mr. Shipley.
Yes.
Mr. Lot,
Yes.
Mr. Guthrie, absent, motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Steve, second? All in favor?
Aye.